A very warm welcome to all the participants who have joined in for this session and logged in for the session. And we hope that you're all keeping safe in these difficult times. Yeah, a lot of you might have, might be in places which have opened up, unlike Bombay, which is still in, locked up for these circumstances. So, in furtherance of our Founders 101 series, where we have so far covered topics like impact and application of force majeure clauses, corporate compliance relaxations granted to startup in the COVID-19 times, startup policy, drafting of employee stock option plans, flipping to US or Singapore, getting ready for Series A funding, key clauses of a term sheet, and IP protection. I think these are the topics we covered so far. And today we bring to you yet another interesting topic on debt. What are the various forms of debt available to you as a startup, and what are the different forms of security packages, underlying that debt? So, as we all know, finance is essentially the lifeblood of any business. As startups and more specifically the bootstrapped ventures need, they need a timely influx of funds to survive, whether by way of equity or by way of debt. It's rare that a startup, would backed by a strong idea, would also have its own personal treasure trunk to survive through the journey. And this is exactly why we have angel investors, venture capitalists, and other financing options which are available to startups, and obviously each come, with their own set of nuances. The funds that you can broadly, obtain can be categorized as: one, the equity financing bucket, where you have the angel investors and the venture capitalists, or the private equity funds, which we've discussed in our previous sessions in the series. And then you have debt financing, which can be categorized into, loans from banks and NBFCs, which is non-banking financial companies; external commercial borrowings if it's a foreign lender; the loans which are specifically granted to medium, small, and medium, micro, and small enterprises by the government; and venture debt. Now, considering each of these options, loans from banks essentially, which is either the banks or the non-banking financial companies grant loans and become business lenders and not owners, essentially, like how it runs in an equity setup. These loans are procured so that they can be used for various business needs. It could be purchase of inventory and equipment, it could be operating capital, it could be fund requirement for expansion, etc. This form of debt comes with its set of drawbacks, especially because the interest on the loan has to be paid periodically, irrespective of how your business is really faring. The bankers may ask for a substantial collateral, and you may need to prove a good credit record along with the fulfillment of other terms and conditions that come along with your loan. The second, the second popularly used category, also from a startup perspective, is the credit guarantee trust for micro and small enterprises, which has been set up by the Ministry of Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprises, the Government of India initiative, which is basically to encourage entrepreneurs to seek loans or get loans up to 1 crore without a collateral or a surety. And any new and existing micro and small enterprise can essentially take the loan from a scheduled commercial bank or a specified regional rural bank, NSIC, SIDBI, etc., which have signed up an agreement with the Credit Guarantee Trust. The third most resorted and the most popular form of debt that is available is the venture debt, which is essentially a funding which is tailored for equity-backed businesses that do not have the cash flows or the assets required for the traditional debt funding. Now, it is a type of debt financing which is provided to fund working capital or other capital expenses. And if such funding is properly used, how we have seen it, it can essentially reduce dilution while accelerating your company's growth at a limited cost. Unlike traditional bank lending, venture debt is available to startups and growth companies that do not have a positive cash flow or a significant asset to use as a collateral. The other, form of funding, which is primarily from non-resident lenders, is the external commercial borrowings, where funds can be obtained from non-resident lenders, commonly, in various forms, under two routes, which is the automatic route and the approval route, depending on the category of the eligible borrower, recognized lender, the amount of ECB that can be availed, the average maturity period, and other applicable factors which the law prescribes. Now, broadly, these are the funding options that can help you meet your financial needs. And then there are some unconventional modes of financing also, which have now become popular in India, such as crowdfunding, approaching incubators, etc. to discuss and delve further into the topic of debt, we have a very interesting panel today, where apart from our experts on debt financing, Aditya and Aishwarya, we have Samir, who comes with a wealth of experience of over 15 years in the financial services sector. And let's just start right from here. And here goes my first question to Aditya. Aditya, if you could just explain to the audience an overview of the bank and the NBFC loan, and the venture debt scenario. What are these forms of loans that are available? What is the equity upside in a venture debt, and how does it really work?
uh, Products that are offered by banks and NBFCs, we primarily include a term loan, working capital loan, overdraft facilities, or any equipment or vehicle financing that are generally given by banks and NBFCs. And I think the most common loan product that is offered by banks and NBFCs is, say, a term loan and a working capital loan. I think there's some disturbance here. So the key features of a term loan are that the term loan is generally offered for a fixed amount, and that is used by the borrowers for acquisition of any fixed asset or like starting a new production line. So as I was saying, I think we can focus first on term loan. So term loan is a product which is commonly offered by NBFCs and banks, and they are offered to the borrowers to meet their requirements of purchasing, say, a fixed asset or like starting a new production line or meeting any other growth opportunities which they require on immediate basis. Now, again, the term loan is generally for, say, a shorter term or a longer term, depending on the requirement of the borrower. Uh, Often the term loans have a moratorium period. Moratorium period is basically an initial breather period wherein the principal amount need not be paid. However, the interest will continue. Basically, this is to ensure that there's no extra additional burden for, say, initial period of 3 months or 6 months on the borrower to repay the principal amount as they are using up the loan for a particular requirement like acquisition of assets. Now, the term loans typically have an interest rate which is either a fixed interest rate or a floating interest rate, that is depending on the commercials that are agreed between the parties. And the term loans are often secured by hard assets or any other assets which the company may own. And in addition to that, there are also other guarantees and other forms of securities that are given in case of a term loan. We'll be discussing that in detail in the subsequently. Now, the next form of loan that is generally offered by the banks and NBFCs are the working capital loans. Now, working capital loans are generally to meet the working capital requirements of the borrowers, and they generally don't have a fixed drawdown as such. The borrowers are given a flexibility to draw down as and when they require they have a working capital requirement. And again, we have seen that the working capital loans are either, say, unsecured or secured. In cases where the credit rating of the borrower and even the promoter is higher, the banks do take a risk and give up a unsecured loan. Of course, there are certain other requirements which they need to meet. Next form of loan that is generally offered by banks and NBFCs is equipment financing or vehicle financing. So, like, say, if a borrower is in manufacturing sector, or like if it is in a sector such as, say, wherein it needs to, say, it's in a transport sector or logistics sector, wherein it also needs to invest in vehicles, a typical financing is provided to buy those assets, and security is created on the assets which are acquired by such borrowers. However, like, there are certain drawbacks of banks and NBFC loans because typically they require a very strong collateral or a security package backing for each of the loans which they are providing. And say when we look at that, say in case of a startup or an early stage company which are asset light, generally don't have a lot of collateral offered to secure these loans. So the banks at times refrain from giving loans to such startups and early growth stage companies. The other issue is that they also have a lot of their internal requirements and their due diligences to get the loan sanctioned. So it takes in a longer period compared to the other forms of that is generally available. So, and like we know that the companies which are at the growth stage, they require capital on immediate basis or like as soon as possible. So that is one of the drawbacks. So this broadly covers the different kinds of loans that are offered by a bank or an NBFC. Now we can move on to venture debt. Now venture debt is a specific product. If you can look at, like, it is specifically curated for early stage or like the growth stage companies, which generally are asset light and they don't have sufficient collaterals to offer for raising any debt financing. So I'll explain how a venture debt works. So venture debt platforms generally target the companies who have raised initial funding, say like their Series A or Series B equity funding from a set of investors, and are looking for additional growth capital to say invest in their working capital or like starting a new line of business. However, they don't want to go ahead and raise an equity financing, which may lead to further dilution of the investors as well as the promoters. Because as and when you raise equity financing, a new person comes in and everyone gets diluted subsequently. The other reason why venture debt is very lucrative in the market right now for startups is that it helps the company increase their valuations for the subsequent round of financing, wherein they bridge the gap between the equity and the debt requirement of the company, and that helps them increase the valuation of the company. So in the subsequent financing round, without further diluting their stakes, their valuation goes up and they can raise more and more equity. Now, looking at the typical characteristics of a venture debt. Now, it is more or less similar to banks and NBFCs when it comes to, say, offering interest rates, moratoriums, and term or tenor of the loan. However, the security package requirements are slightly different than that of a typical bank or an NBFC loan. And here, the venture debt firms often underwrite the loan by looking at the growth potential of the company. And so, of course, like it is definitely a secured loan, but the security requirement is slightly different than that of the banks and NBFCs. So that makes it all the more lucrative for startups and early growth stage companies. Now, there are typically two models that we see in a venture debt investment in a company. The first one is a term loan structure, which is similar to what a bank or an NBFC proposes, and the second one is a NCD subscription structure. Now, these structures are mainly dependent on the type of entity a venture debt fund is. So, say if a venture debt entity is in the form of an NBFC, it goes for a term loan structure, and say if it is in a form of a AIF or a alternative investment fund, then they go for an NCD subscription structure. Now, the typical features of say a term loan structure is that they provide again a fixed tenor that is 3 to 5 years, which is typical. There's a moratorium on the principal amount, considering again the main reason why a loan is being provided is for growth of the company, and if the companies are expected to start repayment as soon as the loan is given to them, then it will just be counterproductive. There are other features like the interest payments and basically the extension of tenor and prepayment options that are given in a typical term loan. Now, the next model is of an NCD subscription model. This is more or less similar to a term loan model, where again the NCDs carry a fixed coupon rate and they have a fixed tenor, plus they have an initial moratorium. However, the procedural requirements of an NCD subscription is slightly different, and they also need to meet in certain criteria and comply with the Companies Act provision, such as how an NCD will be issued. That is something which we'll cover subsequently when we dig deeper into the NCD route. some of the key features that we need to look at and like ensure wherein it's an NCD structure is that a secured NCD cannot exceed a term of more than 10 years, and the NCDs need to be redeemed within a period of 10 years. However, the venture debts are generally for a period of 3 to 5 years, so that should not be an issue. Now, considering that the NCD, the loans that are given by a venture debt firm are based on the growth potentials of the company, and they are taking additional risk over and above what a bank or NBFC would take. So they also expect to get a certain return on the equity side of the company. So they do invest in the equity of the company to gain returns whenever the company grows further and the valuation increases. I think these are the key features of, say, a bank and NBFC loan and a venture debt product. Over to you, Harshita.
Thank you, Aditya, for giving us a quick overview on the various forms of financing. I think after having understood the different forms of financing, let's just move on to Samir. And I think, Samir, you also have a lineup of a few questions from the audience on how the venture debt financing really works. So Samir, how have you seen venture debt different from a typical bank or NBFC loan? And how do you guys, at Altiria, identify companies for their investment? And are there any typical sectors that you look at when you're selecting companies or when you're shortlisting companies starting in the debt?
Sure. Let me take the first question, right? And while Aditya and you both have elaborated a lot on types of debt and how banks lend and how NBFCs and venture debt people look at it, but having been both in a bank and in a venture debt setup, let me give a little bit of perspective. See, for banks, they typically form a underwriting as they look at cash flows, they look at track records. So they want companies that have at least 3 years of audited balance sheets. In some cases, they can be a little bit more flexible, but they look at cash flow potential, and there should be a hard collateral as assets. While venture debt, like Aditya mentioned, is largely taking a call on the future ability of the company to really grow fast. It's a special type of capital available, special type of debt to companies that have a high potential, growth potential, and those that are backed by established venture capital players. Which means that these companies will be growing and raising capital every 12, 15 months. And that's where venture debt can play a complementary role. Versus a bank or an NBFC that will really look at, like I said, at hard securities, we are taking a call on the enterprise value creation over here, which means that company will grow in the future, will have a better valuation, will raise more equity. We look at more about cash stock that is available. What's the cash that's available over there? How much runway can they have? And with that, to what level can the business grow? Can I add some amount of additional debt on top of that to either give the company a longer runway, or alternately give the company some amount of capital to experiment and do something else in the business which helps them achieve their milestones faster? The bottom line is that company should be able to achieve the next round of funding at a better valuation. So while banks look at really hard assets, want to see cash flows, we are not too fussed about existing cash flows. They may be, like they mentioned, they could be negative in the short term. But we see for our underwriting, we look at the potential for the company to keep growing and raising equity in the future. Coming to Alteria's part as to how do we look at companies, like I said, for us the cut is any company above a Series A, which means someone should have raised at least $4 to $5 million and form an institutional, reputed institutional investor. That's where we can come in and play and add that sliver of capital. Typically, venture debt is about anywhere between 15 to 20, in some cases maybe 25% of the equity that's been raised that comes in as additional form of capital. Compared to bank debt, banks have hard restrictions. So they need to fund an asset, or it needs to fund a working capital, which also has further nuances, right? There can be an overdraft line, there can be a CC, a cash credit line, which is linked to, again, what current assets you have. But the debt that the venture debt can be used for any purpose. There's no specific end use restrictions. So one can utilize it for either even doing a marketing spend. You want to do an ad blitz, so take this money and experiment with it. You want to do an acquisition, which banks do not lend money for. So there's really no end use restriction on that. And when we look at from an Altiria perspective, we look at companies that have, like I said, been backed by marquee investors. And from our perspective, the assessment goes into, can this company grow in the next 12, 15 months to attract future equity? On the sector perspective, we aren't too fussed about any specific sectors. We are open to evaluating whole range, right from whether it's e-commerce, whether it's fintech, logistics, technology. Some of few sectors that we stay away from would be real estate and infrastructure projects because they typically require a large amount of debt capital. And we like to be in situations where we are the only lenders and there aren't too many other lenders involved in the business. It keeps things simpler. I hope I've covered all three aspects. Or
yes, you did, Sameer. I think I'll, and just to quickly reiterate it for the purpose of the audience and some questions which are coming our way in terms of whether venture debt can be raised by companies which have not raised equity finance from angel seed or VCs. I think the answer, Sameer just gave that answer, which is largely no, because this is not a pure play debt where you take loans or assistance from financial institutions or NBFCs. So a venture debt is typically granted to companies which have some form of a venture equity financing in the company, essentially. Sameer, another question I think you can probably take it up because it's just in the flow, which is that how can debt raise the valuation of the company unless it's growth, etc. There is growth created, and in fact, debt creates risk for a startup, so should be depressing the valuation.
No, I think that's a very pertinent question. In fact, we strongly believe that excess equity does not kill a company, but excess debt can kill a company, right? And I said that we limit it to about maybe 20-25%, 15 to 25% of the equity that's been raised. Now let's look at how this can help in creating valuation, enterprise value as the way we look at it. So if a company had to be raising, let's say, a Series A of 5 million, hypothetical number, let's say the valuation is 15 million pre-money, and you add on top of that the 5 million of debt, right? So which is a 25% dilution. Now, instead of kind of diluting 25% at Series A, if the promoters had raised only 2 million as equity and took 1 million as venture debt, they would have saved that amount of dilution that is there. The same money, if the company grows, and that's a call that we take, right? The attractiveness of the business of the segment to attract future equity. If the company grows fast enough and is attractive in the next 12, 15 months' time, they can raise the same amount of capital which they've raised as debt right now, but as equity in the future at a much better valuation. So the whole idea that you minimize your dilution at each stage when you're raising capital by mixing it, blending it with equity and with debt. And from a founder's perspective, I think that's a very, very critical point right through, right, whether it's in Series A or even in Series D. They want to protect their dilution. So by blending it with some amount of debt, you can protect current dilution to raise the same amount of capital as equity, but in the future at better valuation.
Thank you, sir.
Does that kind of address the query?
Yeah, I think that does, and that's absolutely clear in terms of how does the valuations work in venture debt rounds. Over to you, Aishwarya. Now that we've understood the basics of the loan or the financing options available onshore, what are the offshore debt funding options that are available to a startup in India? Can they look forward, or can they look up to non-resident lenders for granting loans? And what kind of non-resident lenders do we really do qualify as eligible for the purposes of granting loans to domestic resident Indian entities? If you could throw some light there.
Thanks, Harshita. So yes, as Harshita mentioned, there are forms of lending or obtaining loans from foreign lenders as well. And this is currently contained in one of the forms is the ECB regime, and this is contained in the ECB guidelines as to what are the conditions for availing debt from foreign lenders. So what is ECB? ECB is loans raised by Indian resident entities from recognized non-residents. In case of ECB, since this is money coming from outside, there are restrictions as to who can be the borrower, the lender, the minimum maturity period, the rate of interest, the permitted end use. The ECB regime in India was liberalized in early 2019, and several requirements as to the eligible borrower, lender, permitted end use have been relaxed substantially. So I will briefly explain the key aspects of the 2019 ECB guidelines. ECB can be in the form of INR denominated ECB or in foreign currency, which is any freely convertible foreign currency. They can be in the form of bank loans, trade credits, foreign currency convertible bonds, foreign currency exchangeable bonds, rupee denominated bonds, which is popularly called as masala bonds. But they can't be in the form of compulsorily or fully convertible instruments, which is converted under equity instruments. Then what is who are the eligible borrowers who can borrow in India? Are eligible entities, all eligible entities who are entitled to receive foreign direct investment are considered as eligible borrowers and can avail ECB. Now, one question arises as to whether limited liability partnerships can avail ECB in India. And while under the non-debt, instrument rules, a person resident outside India can invest into the capital of an LLP, where it is operating under the automatic route and where there are no FDI-linked performance conditions. The FAQs released by the RBI in relation to ECBs clarify that LLPs cannot avail ECB. There is also a minimum amount or maximum amount of ECB that can be raised by an Indian entity, which is up to USD 750 million or its equivalent per financial year. Now, who are the recognized lenders who can lend ECB? ECB, the lender should be a resident of an FATF or IOSCO compliant country. FATF is Financial Action Task Force. You can also have individuals as lenders if they are foreign equity holders. I will explain what a foreign equity holder is. Foreign branches, subsidiaries of Indian banks are also permitted to be lenders in case of foreign currency ECB. There is also a minimum average maturity period for the loan that is availed. So what is minimum average maturity period is how long the disbursed amount is retained by the borrower, and the average of the same is calculated. So this is the minimum average maturity period generally is 3 years, but there is a relaxation or a higher threshold in certain cases. For example, ECB raised by manufacturing companies up to USD 50 million or its equivalent per financial year. Then the MAMP is 1 year. ECB raised from foreign equity holder for working capital purposes, general corporate purposes, or repayment of rupee loans, then the minimum average maturity period must be 5 years. And in some cases, it's also 10 years. You may be able to start repaying in parts before completing the minimum average maturity period, but the 3-year, 5-year, 10-year requirement must be met with. Now, what is a foreign equity holder that I was talking about? Is an entity or an individual that holds a minimum of 25% in the capital of the company, either directly or 51% indirectly, or a group company with common overseas parent. In case of ECB from a foreign equity holder, the liability, the ECB liability equity ratio cannot exceed 7:1. But this is not applicable in case of ECB raised below USD 5 million. There is also a limit for the interest rate. That is, interest rate is included in what is called as the all-in cost ceiling. What is all-in cost ceiling is rate of interest, other fees, expenses, charges, guarantee fees, but excludes any commitment fees, withholding tax that is paid in INR, and any penal interest or prepayment charges. So all-in cost must not exceed the benchmark rate plus 450 basis points. In case of foreign currency denominated ECB, the benchmark rate is 6 months LIBOR rate of different currencies. And in case of INR denominated, then the prevailing yield of the Government of India securities of the maturity period or the tenure. So since there is a restriction on maximum interest that is chargeable, which is not there in case of loans given by NBFCs, this may be of benefit, for companies borrowing ECB. But of course, ECB is a foreign loan, and there are certain additional compliance requirements as compared to other loans. The penal interest or prepayment charges is not covered within the all-in cost, and then lenders can charge up to 2% of the overall interest as prepayment, penal interest. Then end-use restrictions. So ECB cannot be used for any purpose. So there are restrictions as to should not be used for real estate activities or investment into capital markets in India or for further equity investment. In case of ECB proceeds for working capital purposes, general corporate purposes, repayment of rupee loans in India, then there are certain restrictions as to minimum average maturity period. So all these conditions seem to be that a lender must comply with and not the borrower. But then since the borrower is the Indian entity, the obligation under Indian laws is on the borrower to ensure compliance. And any penalty for non-compliance will be on the Indian borrower. So we have seen many cases where, companies without realizing, receive a loan from a foreign shareholder, or, if they have a holding company abroad from that holding company and they've not complied with the ECB guidelines. So while it may be a small amount, any non-compliance will be a violation of the FEMA. Then there is a procedure given for taking ECB. So if the borrower and lender meet all the conditions, then you can execute the agreement with regard to availing the ECB and apply for a number known as the LRN, loan registration number, with your authorized dealer bank. And this loan registration number must be availed prior to drawing down any portion of the loan amount. And any changes in your terms of ECB must be reported to RBI whenever you are planning to change it. If you don't meet the conditions, then you will need to seek prior approval of RBI for availing ECB, as Harshita was mentioning, approval route and automatic route. And RBI will give you consent on a case-to-case basis. Now, ECB can also be converted into equity, provided that there is no breach of sectoral caps on the foreign equity holding under the FDI policy. And while converting, applicable pricing guidelines must also be met with. So shares will have to be issued at fair value as on the date of conversion. And filings will need to be made with RBI for allotment of shares as well. These lenders can also take security by way of charge on movable assets, immovable assets, pledge over securities such as shares, debentures, corporate, or even corporate or personal guarantee in favor of the lender. There are restrictions on enforcement. Say in case of immovable asset, the lender can sell it only to a person resident in India, but movable asset may be taken out of India. There are special dispensations, relaxations under the ECB guidelines for certain types of companies. We have already dealt with ECB by recognized startups in another session, but to briefly touch upon it, some relaxations are that there is no limit on the all-in cost or the interest rate that can be charged. It can be mutually agreed between the borrower and lender. The form of ECB can also be in the form of loan, or it can also be in the form of optionally convertible or partially convertible preference shares, which is not there in the case of regular ECB by other companies. There is also the end use is that it should just be used for expenditure in connection with the business of the borrower, and there are no specific restrictions given. However, there is one catch, that is the borrowing per startup will be limited to USD 3 million or equivalent per financial year. But this is also a good number in itself. These are some of the key considerations of ECB. Over to you, Harshita.
Thanks, Aishwarya. I think that was a good brief and overview about what are the how does an ECB really work, and whether you can go approach a non-resident lender for meeting your funding requirements. We've all heard about CCDs, and we also have questions from the audience where they understand what CCD is, which is a compulsorily convertible debenture, which is usually the mode of instrument which is subscribed to by non-resident investors by subscribing into your company, since it's a mandatorily and compulsorily convertible convertible into equity instrument. While we are talking about debt, another important instrument, and Aditya also mentioned it, previously a little before in this discussion, was an NCD, which is a non-convertible debenture, which is a more debt-like instrument, and there is no equity play there. So Aditya, if you could explain on the basics of NCD subscription and how an NCD plays out as compared to a term loan, whether it's an onshore with respect to an onshore entity or an offshore entity.
Sure, Harshita. So I think NCD, again, as mentioned by Harshita, is a security instrument that is issued by a company, and it's slightly different from, say, a term loan. For an NCD subscription, the company needs to follow the Companies Act prescribed procedure for issuance of these instruments. Generally, it is done through a private placement process. Now, the private placement process for an NCD issuance is something similar to that of any other equity instrument or, say, a CCPS instrument. Only difference between them is that here you don't require a valuation report, and generally the NCDs are issued at the face value of the instrument. So basically, the brief process, I'll just go through the process on how an NCD subscription happens. So first, once the term sheet and the commercials are finalized between the borrower and the lender, the company passes a board resolution approving the issuance of NCDs along with the terms of the NCDs to the particular investor. Then it is again approved via shareholders meeting, and the private placement offer is also again there approved. Once that is over, the private placement process or the offer is open for a fixed period of time, that is anywhere between the 30 days to 60 days. It can go on up to a year or so. Once the offer is made to the particular investor, that is the lender in this case, the lender will wire the money to the company. Once the money is received by the company in their designated account, they'll issue the instrument, that is the NCD instrument, to the lender. And again, once that is issued, they are again issued typically a debenture certificate similar to a CCPS certificate or an equity share certificate, and then the whole tenor of the NCD instrument starts. Now, some of the key features of NCDs are, say, if an NCD is a secured instrument, that is, it is secured by any of the collaterals, then the companies are required to appoint a debenture trustee. Now, the debenture trustee is appointed to act for and on behalf of the debenture holders and to hold the security for and on behalf of the debenture holders. Now, for a debenture trustee to be appointed, the company again needs to enter into standard agreements like a debenture trustee appointment agreement, and then a debenture trust deed, which typically talks about the rights and obligations of the debenture trustee, and plus what are the other requirements that a trustee has from the company, plus the whole process on how a debenture trustee needs to hold a meeting of the debenture holders or the majority of the debenture holders when there are more than one subscribers to the particular issue. And the whole security package that is created here, that we'll talk in the next section of the session, will be created in the favor of the debenture trustee, and the debenture trustee will be holding the security on behalf of the debenture holders. And he'll be actually the main purpose is that the debenture trustee is appointed to ensure that there's a one channel of communication between the company and the debenture trustee when there are more than one debenture holders. So it streamlines the whole process. The other main requirement of an NCD or any debenture instrument is that it needs to be redeemed within a period of 10 years. So say when we look at any NCD subscription issue, we need to always look at and like keep in mind that it can't be for a tenure of more than 10 years, and in 10 years it needs to be compulsorily redeemed. Now there's another requirement, that is of a debenture redemption reserve. So the company needs to create a separate account or like set aside a certain amount of funds that will be reserved only for the redemption of the debentures, and that again depends on how and when the debentures are issued. So this is just a brief overview of how an NCD is issued and what an NCD is as an instrument. Now, as I discussed earlier also, it is different from a term loan, though it has most of the characteristics of a loan, that is like a fixed interest or a fixed interest, the tenor, moratorium, etc. However, considering it's an instrument that is subscribed to by the investors and issued by the company needs to follow a certain additional procedural requirements on their end. So I think this covers the NCD route. Now, coming to an onshore and offshore NCD subscription, we have generally seen that the onshore, it is more or less straightforward. When an onshore investor is investing in the NCD, there's a simple process that needs to be followed. However, when the instrument is subscribed to by offshore investors, it can be done through only a few kinds of different routes. One of them being a FPI route, wherein a foreign portfolio investor can invest in NCDs of a company. However, there are again certain restrictions on these kinds of investment. Earlier in the older regime, 100% an FPI entity could subscribe to 100% of an issue of a debenture. However, now based on the new revised requirements of both RBI and SEBI, an FPI can only invest up to 50% of the whole issue of an NCD issuance. So basically, say if a company is issuing debentures worth of 100 crores, only 50 crores can come in from a foreign portfolio investor. Additionally, there's a minimum maturity requirement, that is an FPI subscribed NCD cannot mature before a tenure of 1 year. So NCDs cannot be issued for generally a shorter tenure, that is 3 to 6 months. We hardly see any such NCD issuances by any of the parties there. Now there's one more route under the FPI, that is a VRR route, and that is a voluntary retention route, wherein an FPI can invest 100% of an issue of an NCD. However, it needs to comply with additional conditions. Now, herein the main condition is that the 75% of the issuance or the 75% of the NCDs cannot be redeemed prior to a 3-year period or a 3-year term from the date of issuance of the NCD instruments, and only 25% of the NCDs can be redeemed during this 3-year period. However, the main advantage, like I discussed, is that you become the sole lender to the company and you don't need to have another lender along with you in the company. Now, again, there are restrictions or like the total VRR route investment in India, wherein an auction for an investment through a VRR route, and again it is dependent on the amount that is invested and the total tenor of the loan. Based on that, there are certain requirements that RBI requires, and that we can, I think, discuss separately. So this briefly covers both the routes wherein an NCD investment can occur from an option.
Thank you, Aditya. Over to you, Aishwarya, and if you could quickly summarize, because we may run out of time. We need to take some questions as well. Aishwarya, if you could quickly summarize the different security packages. What are the types of securities which are generally asked as collaterals? Hypothecation, mortgage, pledge, and guarantee.
Sure, Harshita. So, what is security is what is availed by the lender from the borrower to safeguard their exposure to borrowers and minimize the risks associated with lending. A lender will choose a security basis the business of the company, the amount of loan, while a bank may require a mortgage or personal guarantee from a promoter. A venture debt lender, as Aditya and Harshita mentioned, an NBFC or an ECB lender may not typically ask for a mortgage because they're aware of the business of the company, and that typically companies that are just starting off may not necessarily have immovable property such as land and buildings in their name. And the other option would be hypothecation on IP or receivables, stock in trade, share pledge, corporate guarantee by a holding or subsidiary company. In one loan transaction, you may see the borrower giving multiple types of security. So what is mortgage? Mortgage is the transfer of interest in immovable property to secure the debt. So in India, there are different types of mortgage. One of the most common being the deposit mortgage by deposit of title deeds. Pledge is where possession of movable property will be handed over to the lender. For example, if the borrower company holds shares over another entity, or the shares of the founder in the borrower company may be pledged. Share certificates or a signed share transfer form may be handed over to the lender so that the lender can easily enforce the security. In case of shares in DMAT form, the securities will need to be marked as pledged with the depository. In case of default, the lender can sell these shares and get the money. Hypothecation is charge on movable assets without delivery of possession. So as I mentioned before, it can be on IP, stock in trade, receivables. Sometimes lenders may even ask for a lien over fixed deposits maintained with banks. Then there is corporate guarantee. Sometimes all the value that the entity holds may lie in its holding or subsidiary company. So guarantee by such a company may be taken. Guarantees, you'll need to ensure that they're in compliance with the Companies Act. And the other option is personal guarantee by a promoter or founder. So in case of personal guarantee, the promoter will be personally liable in case of any default in the loan. So it is necessary that while entering into this guarantee, it is important for a promoter to ensure that, he's limiting his liability to the extent possible, and, otherwise not be required to bring all his personal assets. Under security documents, particularly the hypothecation and pledge, a power of attorney will also be taken by the lender. In case of a pledge, this power of attorney is taken so that, the lender can exercise the rights over the security, attend the general meetings as a holder of shares, or transfer the shares in its name. And in case of hypothecation also, it may be, to attend legal proceedings, to deal with creditors, other creditors. So as a borrower, it is important to understand what the lender is asking for in the power of attorney and negotiate accordingly. Other important points to be kept in mind is that if there are multiple lenders, documentation with one lender may have a clause that to take their consent before availing any further loans or before creating a security over their property. So it is important that this is kept in mind and such consent is taken. Otherwise, it will be a default under the earlier loan agreement. And if you have multiple lenders, then and they are taking charge on the any charge or this thing over the same asset, then it's necessary to negotiate with them who will have superior right over the asset, or if they will have equal right over the same asset. Sometimes in loan documents, the lenders will also have the right to seek additional security if they believe that the security that they have taken, is in jeopardy. So, Harshita, this is briefly on security packages.
Thank you, Aishwarya. I think the topic we've tried to cover, the broad areas as much in terms of giving an overview of the areas of debt and the security packages, and to end on to this session, I will direct my last questions to Samir. Samir, how do you see COVID-19 impacting the venture debt industry or probably the debt industry as a whole? And if you have any specific guidance for the promoters and the consumers.
Right. Even prior to COVID, I think we were all getting a little bit more cautious from the real venture capital market itself. Right? There was this whole thing about the bubble in 2019. We saw a lot of valuations getting corrected. I think so. There was the sense of being more cautious from the last few months itself, and then COVID has come and hit all of us, right? But having said that, from the venture debt perspective, while we as a fund, and we talk from our perspective, we would be still open to evaluating investments, but the bar will be much higher right now. So earlier, the risk that one would take on certain businesses, saying that okay, while there is great amount of equity over there and a good cap table, maybe the business still needs to prove a certain parameters, for before they reach the next level of growth. Now I think we will probably fundamentals of businesses a lot more, and the bar for funding new entities will be that much higher. And I think the same will apply across the debt industry, whether it is whether it's mortgage lending or in NBFC. Then the margin of safety months, but getting bars will be much higher, and from our perspective, the bar of funding will be also much higher. The first time in the past, always advise founders to one is take money when it's available rather than plan for taking money when you need it. So if you have investors who are keenly evaluating your business and want to invest, take as much money as available, and don't be too picky about valuation in this market. If you're getting capital, it's great. Take the equity and shore it up with some amount of debt if that's possible. Plan to have capital at least for the next 12 to 8, at least I would think till the next 18 months you should build out, assuming that things are not going to get easy, and they'll in fact actually get tougher from that funding perspective. So if you're getting access to capital, take as much as that's available to you, and plan for for the next 18 months to at least have this.
Thanks, Samir. I think that sums it all for the audience in terms of the next steps for at least for the next 6, 7 or probably 6 to 12 months, which is make use of the debt which is available in the market, and having said that, I think while you may want to avail debt and you may want to avail more equity as is available, I think the word of caution from us is also in terms of using it judiciously, because you do not know where the end of the tunnel really lies here, post COVID-19 times. So I think use it judiciously so that you can survive yourself in these tough times, at least for the next 12 months. So prepare yourselves for that. And I think with that note, we would we would like to end this session. I think then for the audience, I think there are players, and both the venture equity and the venture debt players who are supporting you guys in these times, whether in terms of the and specifically in terms of the players who are with you in the capital structure existing, maybe the newer players or the new guys that you're approaching for fresh round of debt or first round of equity may have their their asks in terms of valuations, etc. But the existing players are certainly supporting you. So on that note, I think I would like to take a bit goodbye to the audience on this session. Thank you very much for the panel to be joining, and more specifically Sameer for taking time out and joining us today.